Happen. And this is precisely the point I tried to make today. It's much about politics, of course, much about war, much about disparities, but it's much about the human being behind all the stories as well. Let's say, in my experience back in my birth country, Venezuela, I never was involved in politics. For me, politics was like a bad word. So I can remember barely when I got disappointed about a political party, so I tried to keep myself away of all this stuff. Always, all my life. So I prefer to dedicate my efforts, my knowledge, my learnings with many people, working with communities. And it led me to work with vulnerable people, dedicate my time assembling teams, communities, working for communities, try to deliver for them the best of our knowledge, to empower them, to build them their own resources. I'm talking about 2000, maybe before. So I never expected, never imagined that simple conversations, simple, even on the shadow of many trees, talking with people, never expected a simple conversation with people about how you can be better yourself, how you can take the best of yourself to empower your community, is going to lead me to escape my country 20-something years later. Why I never expected that? Again, because I tried to keep myself, and I have to confess, I was ignorant by then, totally away of politics. So 20 years later, I have to recognize all ourselves, we are political animals. We have no way to escape because we try to rule our life in some ways. We try to put order in our life. We try to follow somebody, and it involves politics. But we were, and I say involving many people who worked with me, thinking that politics is a bad thing. But what was really wrong, not being involved in politics. And we used to joke about, left the politics for politicians. No. So that proved to was our worst mistake. I remember my country being really red flagged like in 1988, 1999. Really plagued with many people coming from abroad, trying to support the elected president. So part of this job, and many people coming to try to do that job, was to teach the people in the rural part of our country about politics. So I just asked myself, and many of my team asked myself, why people from abroad is coming to teach politics in our country? So somebody really clever took the chance and said, well, let's do something. Don't try to stand against these people. Let's try to work with them, but instead of using their ideas, they're going to use our own ideas. So ideas of democracy. So 20 years later, as I said, I had to escape my country because a simple conversation turned into be a political debate, and a political debate led to be a historic research, and historic research proved to be the fire to light persecution. I never planned to be a migrant. I never expected to leave anything of my life behind. If I planned to come to Europe, should be for vacation, holiday, that's it. But now I am living here 3 years and a half later, and I think there is no way, and if I can't see any way to come back to my country, not in the foreseeable future. I tried to condense what was meaningful at that time for me. I used to be a big fan of Beatles. I love that. I used to travel across my country, and in many of these meetings I met really interesting people, and we again drifted to the political discussion. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And something that really caught my attention is sometimes, at least in our societies in Latin America, people try to divide, try to separate what they think for who votes for. I don't know why. Maybe surrealism, I think. So when I try to condensate this, I choose these pics used to say something that really I like it, and I have no chance to recover. But my travel didn't start just when I got my two, well, in fact, I have 3 Beatles. This is part of our culture. Nothing about walking or cycling, all about driving. So I loved my cars, I loved my life, I loved my thing. I tried to endure the situation for 10 years. So many people telling me, go out your country, go out. It's not worth. So no, my country is really worth. What changed my mind? When I was not able anymore to share my ideas. When I was not anymore to defend a neighbor for the abuse. When people is so polarized that if you think different, you are an enemy. So they turns to be not politics now, to be in persecution, open persecution. Well, how can I describe what many people, many asylum seekers coming from Africa, Syria, Iran, I met here in Swansea, and I will working for them and with them, is all of us share not the same experience, but alike. That means taking or being forced to take an opportunity or to take the only safe way. You are trading off all your life. How can I describe that? First is the travel. First is the travel. So, you know, if you plan to travel, of course, you plan to make your luggage, your baggage, what you're going putting in. But when you decide that we are forced by circumstances to leave your country, you have no chance for that. Take what you can, and that's it. So, what I did, I put on sale all my stuff, my house with all the furniture in, my 2 businesses, my 3 cars, all for sale as a bargain. So I never expected to get the real value of this stuff. But anyway, it's only something. Maybe for your surprise, the only money I could got was able to fill my pocket, just to take a plane, not to come to UK. This is another story, but finally we arrived in UK. So I wanted to show you something. Maybe it could be an image. It could be spoke more than words. Can you help me, Franz, please? Oh, this is, I think, one of the little few belongings I still preserve. Back in my country, when I have to cross the border, being smuggled to reach a plane in Colombia. My wife, sew all our trousers, and we put the equivalent to $3,000, the only money we can get for all our belongings, all our life, be reduced to nothing. So my 2 children, my wife and me, we were traveling with these hidden pockets just to avoid the smugglers, just to avoid the police or whatever wanted to, to catch us and to take our stuff. Finally, when we discover we cannot other way than just to take a plane, and with it, we felt totally lost. Because, again, to migrate, to become a refugee or an asylum seeker is something that you cannot plan or expect. So you have any idea who it's going to be. Try to illustrate and try to talk with a very good friend of mine, migrant for the Middle East. They are really, really struggling with this sense of loss, this grievance, this feeling. I can't remember exactly their words. We are second class citizens in this country. Wow. hard. I didn't expect such a words coming from somebody who was really wealthy and really well known in their country. But you know, I shared something with this, my brothers, my peers. We planned our life, and our life could be represented by a train. At some point, this train wrecked. This train precisely is in the middle of the desert, close to Mecca. Come from Turkey, or used to come from Turkey to Mecca, and was finally abandoned. What will happen if you get on the train with a destiny you planned, but your train crashed, train wrecked? What will you do? No chance to, other than to escape, to run away. Funny enough, this is another wrecked train, an abandoned train in Bolivia. And it's really funny, you know. Nothing funny about being a refugee sometimes, but this is really funny. If somebody can read Spanish, the train is graffitied, say, "Así es la vida." That is the life. And somebody really joking wrote off just about the bottom, "We need a mechanic urgently." So I brought my paper, but I really don't want to read it because all these experiences condensed in lives. So this paper is in Spanish anyway, and I call it Wreck Train because when we try to rebuild life, when we force it, the circumstances to leave everything, friends, family, jobs, destiny used to plan, sometimes even children, and forces to relocate when you have the same rights of other people, when you are not really commanding your life, for an adult is something really hard. So in such a desperation, try to help my friends, and the usual complaints, why happened it to me? In my desperation, I don't know, this brought to my mind, my friend, the problem is our mind is still in our first train. We took the train in our life. We never planned it. We never expected that the train rocked. Happened. Now we are here because we, forced by circumstances, again, we should take another train in a different direction with a destiny uncertain. The problem is our mind is still traveling in the opposite direction. If you can add up this situation, mental, emotional, stressful, with the current policies about migration, so you can imagine, you can feel welcome by many people, open arms from many people. But at the same time, seems like part of the system want to push you out or push you back as soon as they can. It's not really friendly for anyone. It's not really something that can convey positive feelings. In my experience in mental health, that's my background. If I start to detail every symptom, every change, every negative feeling expressed, seems to me to be like a bit of torture. It's the same thing, or more alive. So how can we rebuild our lives? I think integration, I hope, is not just a word that used to be cosmetical, but a real one. So my first experience of integration was just when City of Sanctuary invited me to be part of their panel. It was really valuable to me, but no was that. I started volunteering for RIST. I used to joke, Jamie was my job, my boss there. So it was my first experience helping peers. My first experience even trying to speak English. Yes, it was really valuable, great. I want to keep with my life, all this remember, but not was the most important for me. The most important was in a pub like a year ago, when some local people, Welsh people, invited me for first time in my life to come to a pub, because I didn't know how important is a pub for British social life. We have no pubs in my country, so for me, I was happy that. So they invited me, and after asking and telling me about many stories from the valley, from Swansea to Cardiff, beautiful about the real Wales, many important things, they noticed I was still saying, my country, my country. So one of them said, stop telling your country. This is your country now. It was the most valuable lesson. In integration is two ways. Then we can encounter ourselves, but as well encounter many people here. So if we can, and I'm sure I can, and we can, find common grounds, yes, we can then integrate. We can be part of the culture and we can exchange many positive things. Otherwise, it's again to re-victimize, the re-victimization of people who is escaping and fleeing because they were a victim. Sorry for not crediting properly this image. Somebody passed it to me and I love it. I say, well, this is you. This could be me. This could be any asylum seeker. Just on top of the train, just wrecked it minutes ago, trying to guess what is going to be over our lives. And finally, when this travel starts, the common feeling is loneliness. Can you imagine being in a different place when nobody speaks your language? I was really, really blessed, really lucky. Just arriving, I met a guy who speaks Spanish. So he led me. He taught me, he helped me a lot. Otherwise, I found people, like a Chinese guy I met 2 years ago, struggling, was sent by home office to Swansea without no notice, separate from his only friend, and suffering from depression and under medication. The only way of communication for this guy, really lovely guy, was his phone. No English at all, any other language. So yes, integration has to be a lot with politics, but politics has to be a lot with the individual as well. If you define yourself as a democratic person, if you define yourself as a community being democratic, a city, a country, you will gonna be a sanctuary for anyone looking for safety. This is the lesson I personally learned and many people learned back in our country. If you want to be or you want to enjoy a free country, the freedom should be a start for ourselves, not just to delegate that power in politicians. And finally, I really appreciate you having me here, because for me, for every asylum seeker I have the chance to talk to, one, if not the most meaningful need is to be understood. Not just to be listened, but to be understood. And I feel, thank you Mila, thank you Franz, when you invited me to have this little part here, you are one of the steps I can see as steps in the ladder to integration. So you are tending bridges. Thank you for that. I will appreciate that. Thank you, you all.
Thank you very much, Carlos. That was, incredibly, I think people can agree, incredibly powerful and amazing speech. So thank you so much for coming here and making time for that. It is deeply, deeply appreciated. I know we have a couple of minutes more, but I would like to open the floor. I know this is a lot to take in here, so don't feel pressured or anything, but if people have questions to Carlos or comments or anything they want to say, even if it's not directly a question, please feel free. if not, I guess that is okay too. Because obviously this was quite powerful, I find personally as well. So yeah, I'm sort of like to open it up a little bit to the floor. So does anyone have anything they want to ask?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. It was a very interesting story. I just wonder whether, there's a common experience for many people who come to the country, and I'm a migrant myself, you can probably hear it. And is that if you are rejected by the institutions within the country, maybe being misunderstood by the local people, your kind of perception of the country, perception of the place inevitably changes. And you clearly went through, different challenges on your way. How did it affect your perception of the UK? And, whether that sort of made you feel willing to integrate? I don't even know whether integration is the right thing, but how did it influence your position? How did it influence your view of Wales, of Swansea?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. Definitely, coming to Swansea was the tipping point. Definitely. We spent 5 months in London, and we fought by 3 or 4 months to find English classes. Here in Swansea, using the second week, all the family was enrolled in the college. And 2 weeks later, we were volunteering in different organizations. I think a key experience was just arriving in Heathrow. Maybe I was lucky. So the security guard, because he identified himself, security guard for, not the border force, security guard, yeah. He was really, really nice. I think he's Indian. He was Indian. So he stated, the first thing, you are not under detention, I am not migration, I am not border force, I'm just security guard. And even he asking us, with almost no English, to help another people coming, just arriving. Please, can you explain what your reading is to them, blah, 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 the same you explained to you? So in that moment, I feel hope. Of course, I feel hope. But once we were released, and once it happened mostly with many people being released after some hours, waiting for the process at Heathrow, much depend this first experience, like a baby and first steps. So we found really lovely people back in London, and we really didn't want to come, because we never decided to come to Swansea. It's just dispersal policy. You accept the help as is. Let's go. Finally, when we arrive here, the difference between Wales and London, at least the city we met, is so big. Maybe not just because Wales is a big village. Someone told me that. I like it. But I think we are really, really linked. So one individual organization is able to refer, to forward the people, to communicate. It never happened back in London, I think, because it's big or because all the resources are dispersed. I have no idea. But here, again, we found in 2 and 3 weeks all the essentials we never got in 5 months. Of course, it changed our perception. And mostly I can compare the hostility of home office against the kindness and openness of mostly the people I met.
So first of all, thanks very much for sharing your, it's a traumatic experience and it's not easy, I think, or granted to talk about something, right? I'd like to ask you, we are researchers working with or on migrants and refugees, with people with trauma. And so sometimes we are there just asking stuff, right? Doing the interview, how was the travel, whatever. So what do you suggest to us in order to approach this kind of research, because I think then you can tell us that we do a work that could be important in order to understand, to explain to the people, to try to have an impact on policies, to improve a society to be more welcoming. But how can we do this? Which means, how can we approach people who have traumatic experiences, and how can we produce something that really improves the conditions of these people?
Okay, thank you for asking. I'm going to refer the experience we have been working on in the city of Sanctuary with refugees and asylum seekers. The work with peers proved to be really, really useful. So what we are doing is try to start, we avoid to use the word mentor, but we are really mentoring people. We are trying to pair people with recent arrivals, with refugees, try to integrate them, try to invite them to incorporate it in the normal life. So it has been really, really nice for them. It's like a transition moment. So they can feel more welcome, but as well more soft. This is a kind of soft approach. As well, working for IST, one of the key roles I found proving useful is when someone in charge to help is coming from a BME background. Because I don't know why, I guess the being migrant bond us, coming from different countries. Let's talk about psychology. We try to, this is the normal mind cross. You tend to trust more in your peers, what is familiar for you. So it's normal. So taking advantage of that, we try to introduce the people with people settled down here, refugees or asylum seekers with more time. Contrary, and in this moment in my capacity of counseling, because I used to do counseling, was counseling in my country as well, I have to say, depending the case, mostly people want to express their feelings. They want to be asked and listened. We are not, we cannot maybe express properly ourselves, but we need still to be understood. And contrary to some myths I heard about, we are not made from glass. We are not going to be broken. So life in our countries is really hard and really rough. So maybe my experience for sure was traumatic. Was the first trauma I experienced? No. Sorry. Let me to be blunt. So life here is softer than our countries. So depend, of course, the case. Mostly the people I approached, they told me their story, they straight away. No hesitation. I understand as well as part of the British culture not to be straightforward, not to go direct. This is good. This is good. This is good because prevent some kind of hard touch. It's not too good. We need to be embraced. We used to embrace, we used to touch in our countries, especially in Latin America. Not touching anyone means you're angry. You can be smiling, you can say, I love you. Not touching, suspicious. You're mad at me. Of course, it's part of the integration again. It's part of this mixture. One of the first experience I had was an African lady crying in my shoulder. So at first, I mean, maybe I'm becoming British too soon. I feel like, so I avoid to embrace. I think in my country, instantaneously, I'm gonna respond. And she whispered at me a little bit of a story about genital mutilation. New concept for me, in reality. I read, never met anyone. Did I ask her? No. But between peers, we can extend such a network. What I really suggest is to try to equip refugees or people coming from BME backgrounds to treat the other asylum seekers or refugees. And as well to try to improve or try to bond the people with leadership. If we create leaders within the migrant communities, they're gonna be, the bridges. How many friends now I have here in this country from local population? Like 5. For me, that's it. How many of my friends enjoy the same? Very. Again, the approach should be break the barriers, but in some cases should be a stay away.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very good answer, and hopefully puts these conversations together here in this conference as we had hoped. Are there any other questions or comments or anything people would like to add?
Yes, thank you. I know it's not easy to talk about what you experimented. And the question I have is, is there any different treatment between asylum seekers or people that are new?
Say, in asylum seekers now?
I don't know, asylum seekers or migrants or refugees.
Difference.
Have you ever noticed any difference treatment between?
Oh wow! This question is like the religion.
Yes.
Someone made before. Yes. I am working for Welsh government now, and we are trying to substitute the word refugee and many stuff for migrant to be inclusive. So part of my job is to oversee many documents. So of course this is a formal intention. Reality is people, when I say people, is the common people like you, anyone else in the street, make no difference. So you come from abroad, if they are friendly, they are going to be friendly anyway. In some institutions, in some cases, like home office, yes, sadly they make difference. The Ukrainian crisis arose that. So they are not refugees technically, they are not migrants technically, they are in a kind of limbo. But they are being granted with some status to live here. African people, they were granted refugee but not permanent leave. I can understand it. So yes, I mean, about the legal treatment by the government, yes, it's different. About the people, local people, they are being really lovely to anyone.
Because that's remind me what explained yesterday when I come to when I reached the control. I went to the police agents with my passport. He took it and he asked me where am I going. I explained him that I'm coming to Swansea to attend the conference. He said, about what? I tried to explain to him, and he said that, have you got a return reservation? I said, yes. He said, bring it. I said, no, I don't have connection. I don't have internet, but it is so difficult. Say, if you don't pass. And I spent more than 15 minutes there trying to get internet before the conference. I went there and people come. It was a girl. She came. I think it was his colleague. She asked her if she has a passport. She said yes. She shows her passport, and she said that she comes from. I don't know where she comes, but she's European woman. and she said that she want to spend 2 days and go back. Okay, that's sufficient. And she passed the control, no problem. I spent 15 minutes searching my phone to find the receipt for my train reservation. It can be sometimes too much.
Can imagine.
But don't you kind of like being a non-European, you sort of always expect this sort of attitude in the first place, don't you? I mean, I'm just, I was traveling with Russian passport, and it's always been the case. I'm kind of with 27 papers printed in different languages to show that, what I'm going to do, and, it's sort of, you sort of accept that there's a difference. Actually, don't say, from different countries altogether, but we know both on European, we don't get a French passport now, so I can skip that 30 second process.
Yes,
I just choose a different paper and say this is it, and they start speaking French to me now, so make up the story. But I think it's sort of, that's why it was really strange for me to hear about people voting Brexit, because the sort of idea of mobility, which lots of people were born with, the sort of ability to move across borders, which they sort of took for granted, and they sort of said, no, we don't really care. We want to create a border. For me, it was, do you really want to go through the process of showing the papers, preparing a file of papers? Every time my dad comes to visit me now, it's like I print lots of papers for him, so he doesn't need to rely on the internet. And he's always sort of, he's got every answer possible. Here is here's my property in Russia. I'm going to come back to it. Here's whatever it is, electricity bill from the last year, basically everything imaginable. I'm sure you are going through the similar kind of experience, but that just reflects a very different migration regime for those who, are welcome. And I'm sure there will be more conversation about it tomorrow in terms of, going to a session where Bernhardt is presenting in terms of us versus them, drawing the lines, how people feel about it. I want to have like a conversation rather than a presentational style. I was trying to incite this as, come on, let's not have a kind of us versus them, but have a little more chat. And,
I love that. I love facilitation.
Exactly.
I think that what you say, Sergey, is not necessarily only when people cross borders, like in the case of the Colombian context. Migrants in Bogota experience the same thing as urban administrations, and there is not factors of like another nationality, which is like the relation of the other and at another scale with the same processes, even if we're not talking about international migrants or foreigners, just like people from other departments. I think there is like, in this case, there is a link between urban practices in administration, but there is no factors of nationality. So I think it's quite related with the administration processes in general, with people which are considered as others or non habitual customers, or do you want to say that?
Yeah, different. Maybe that's simple as significant others.
Yes,
Or insignificant others. I'm just using this. I'm still stuck with the phrase. I'm just thinking what was it? Like sort of like a marriage metaphor, isn't it, right?
Can you tell us a bit more about what's here in Swansea? What is there to help people? What is the kind of the setup?
The setup.
Yeah, if that would make sense.
Well, yeah, does a setup exist? I don't know. But what I felt is society here is really developed. Maybe because, again, Wales is small, or maybe that is part of the culture. But I mean, much like you try to find somebody or some help, and instead of saying, Google it, people here, I know, and connect. Literally, happened to me back in London. Everything I asked, oh, Google it. Okay. Here, I think it's worth to mention when the normal route for any asylum seeker coming to Swansea being dispersed is coming to the health board. The health board referred either to East or Swansea Council Voluntary Service. So they assess anyone individually. They ask the people and they try to connect the people with the essentials they need, volunteer opportunities, English classes, friendship, community. And I think having at least 2 or 3 these hubs makes all the difference. In my opinion, my experience, it was. And I've been working, connecting the people with these networks and work it. Not sure about other cities in Wales, not sure about other places in UK, but in Wales it's working really well.
Thank you so much for elaborating on that, Carlos, because I think it relates to what I mentioned earlier. I volunteered for 2 years in the City of Sanctuary, and how important these networks are. And yeah, we sort of, as researchers, right, sometimes we study them and we look at them for their radical potentials, and we're sometimes disappointed if they don't live up to that standard. But in the day-to-day lives of people, they make an incredible difference. And exactly this kind of perception, which maybe some people seem to, but that's sort of how positive your first impressions of certain places and certain experiences were, which maybe might be different from other people, but how it seems to be influenced by the kind of experience you had in this institutional setup in Swansea, and from that kind of knowing the people, that this is like grassroots work that has been done since 10 years and longer, from volunteers and people who are building that in the city, and who now you can see there's the kind of fruits that are real. People here, almost some people are desperate because we're still in Wales. This is like a part of the UK with a hostile asylum regime. People have voted for Brexit here, and still there's people sort of talking about these experiences, and it's very strongly, I think, related to the work organizations like Swansea City of Sanctuary have been doing since they're around since 2008 in Swansea, in some cities sort of around the same time. But how really, really important that is.
I think I should remark, volunteer opportunities are key. Volunteers opportunities are the duo for every asylum seeker not being allowed to work, to do something useful and to develop potential. And I think broadening the scope of all these opportunities and going outreach to find the people and to invite them is key. When it's not, in many of our countries, the volunteer culture is something really reduced, really focalized. Here, it's part integral of the culture. It's something that is really, important and is considered work experience. So when an asylum seeker discover and engage with these opportunities, his eyes got open. I think yes, volunteer is really, really key.
Do we have any last things?